Good evening, everybody. This is Family Energetics Free Evening. I'm Michael Reddy. This is probably whatever, number 9 or 10 or something like that recently. We'll be doing these every couple of weeks until June when we start Family Energetics Core Concepts, that class. I may miss a week while I'm in San Antonio singing and talking at the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. We'll see. I don't know whether that's an on week or an off week for this yet. So tonight I want to share with you and talk to you about something that struck me when I was writing Health, Happiness, and Family Constellations, which I never really heard anybody talk about. We stand up people in a room. They're often silent, and they're just standing in different places in the room, and we know some background information. And all of this starts to have all sorts of meaning very quickly. Their positions relative to one another, their orientations. And, as a former cognitive scientist, I was like, why is that? And that led to this realization that, kind of obvious in a way, but we don't think of it, that all of our thought process is deeply embodied. It's all based on our body. And most of our abstractions are metaphors, dead metaphors on concrete things. Spirit used to mean breath in Latin, and we talk about up and down in ways that aren't just physically up and down. I'm really up today, or I'm down today. There's just zillions of examples like that. So I don't know. I didn't know what to call it, but it became clear that the spaces around the human body have just all sorts of standard meanings. And what we're doing when we see an array of people in like a workshop, or we see an array of object persons, little objects on a tabletop or an altar or on the floor of a room in a constellation pattern, is we are using those meanings to make sense out of what that begins to mean. So, let me start it this way. Let's share the screen. And let's go to Firefox. And let's go here. Okay. And now I have this Zoom thing, which gets in the way.
Nice day.
Sorry? So you guys should be in coaching spaces now, seeing a couple of figures. Everybody doing that? Okay. So here's one of the major sets of metaphors that exist around the body. The front of your body is your default direction of motion. It's the place that you manipulate things. You don't typically manipulate things behind your back, and it's the area that you see. Now, these are defaults, they're generalizations. It doesn't mean that you can't turn your head, or you can't, tie a knot behind your back or something like that. And out of this comes a whole bunch of meanings. The other one that I want to talk about is, so let's just get out of this. And let's go into here. Is that in English, we've basically made time into a kind of abstract space. So we see the future as being in front of us, the present as somehow alongside of us, the past is behind us, and either it's moving past us or we're moving through it. Now, this is not the only way of doing things. There is a language, and I can't remember the name of it right now, in which the default pattern for time is the future is behind people and the past is in front of them. And the reason that they do that is that it's, to them, in their culture, it's obvious that you can't see the future. So where's the space around your body that you can't see? Oh, it's behind you. So of course the future is behind you. And the past is in front of you because you can see it. And you can imagine what a profoundly different orientation this would be, right? We tend to, all these Indo-European languages, we base our notion of time on movement through. So either it's moving towards us or we're moving towards it, one or the other. The Hopi Indian language doesn't do anything like this at all. It doesn't make time into any kind of space at all. And I think it's very cool, and I think it's a much better way of doing it. It says the future is inside of everything. The future is actually emerging from everything. All right, so the future of my living room chair over there is not off someplace in this imaginary distance that I'll get to tomorrow. The future of my living room chair over there is inside the chair. And since everything ultimately is a process, right? Even a chair is an extremely slow process. If we came back 100 years from now, it would be dilapidated, moth-eaten, God knows what would happen to it, right? But it would be changing, and it is changing. And if you look at these two things, I've always thought that it sort of went back to nomadic versus agricultural people. Because the Hopi, the Hopi were in place and were an agricultural people. So the future for them is not this next mountain over there that they're going to get to tomorrow. The future is what's inside their plants, because that's what they're going to need to eat when it gets cold. Does that make sense? Whereas for nomads, that mountain that they're looking at out in the distance, that's tomorrow or the next day, because that's where they'll be. There's a really huge difference in the impact, because if you think of, like the mountain is out there and it's fixed, and it isn't going to change while you get there. But if the future is inside of things like a plant, well, the seed doesn't look like the plant at all. In fact, every stage of the plant is different. So if the future's emerging from the inside of things, I think that's a much more interesting and richer version of how to conceive of time. Somebody's just come in and walking by. Give me a second to get back on track here. Old minds don't stay focused as easily. If you take Ram Dass's Be Here Now, all right, that means sort of don't be off in the future someplace in that abstract space out there in front of you, or back in the past in that abstract space behind you. It means live on this thin line of the present. If you tried to translate Be Here Now into something like Hopi, to me it would come out something like, well, love the chair now. Be with the chair now. Give good energy to the chair now, because the future of that chair and the future of what you and that chair do together, or you and that person do together, is totally based on whether or not you water that garden with presence and love. I don't know if that makes sense to you. What sense does that make? Somebody help me out here.
That's totally, feels totally true, and much easier to be present somehow.
I am not able to think about my life that way because I'm deeply embedded in English, like most of us are embedded in our native language. But every time I look around the room and I think of what's going to happen between me and this, like I always drink my tea out of this. And if I think about what's going to happen between me and this tomorrow, you know, from the perspective of time is just a kind of space, then this thing isn't going to be any different tomorrow than it is right now, unless it breaks or something. But as you know, I'm a shaman, so I'm always talking about things being alive and conscious. So this is a little object person. And in this other point of view, it's a lot easier for me to be friends with this little object person. It's a lot easier for me to feel like if I put presence and care into this little object person, then it's gonna sprout good experiences over the next few days or weeks or whatever. So that's just a kind of little sideline that I wanted to share. But these metaphors, especially this whole metaphor of the future is behind you because it's obvious to this culture. It's obvious to this language group that we can't see the future. So therefore, the stuff we can't see is behind us. That's our blind spot. All right, so back to this now.
Except that, and that's opposite to what we usually.
It is. It's totally opposite. I mean, it would be a very different way to think about the world. Let's see, what am I doing here? I'm in first person here, so let me get out of that. So this is Coaching Spaces, by the way, which is a very cool tool. It takes some work to learn how to manipulate it. So anyway, over here we've got, I don't want to move that. We've got basically this space in front of us that's where we see things, where we manipulate things, and it's the default direction that we move. And then over here we have time. So if we now go and we look at, get this next one up here. And get the zoom out of the way. This, when I don't, it's hard to do these things with one screen when you're, okay. So here's some of the metaphors that start to arise around this, and some of these are going to probably start to look very familiar too. You know, what's in front is whatever we're paying attention to, and what's behind us is whatever we don't see, whatever we're ignoring. These are not the only meanings. These are just some core ones to fool with a little bit. In front of us are the people we follow. Now, are we chasing them, or are they our leaders? We don't care or know at this point. These are just generalities at the moment. In front of us are those that we engage with, either that we love or we attack. I don't know about you, but I don't ever do sessions with clients where I'm sitting absolutely facing them. If there's a table between us, maybe, but putting a table between us is something I was taught not to do in coaching school. So I'm usually sitting at a slight angle. I'm off maybe 35 degrees, you know, so that I don't know if you could see. Can you see me, or, you know, not like this head on. Head on means either love and hugs, or struggle or battle or confrontation or something. It's very polarized. Slightly off angle is, well, we're still within our attention and manipulation area, but we're not directly confronting. On either hand are, and this is vaguer, I think, but on either hand are our partners or our supporters or our superiors. And to me, this is not as solid because some people are right-handed, some people are left-handed. I think that, you know, Hellinger would put the man on the right and the woman on the left, right? In his ordering of families. And I saw Hunter Beaumont do that with somebody in a workshop at one point, and then several of us jumped up and said, well, that's not that absolute, is it? And Hunter did an interesting thing. He said, no, I don't really think it's absolute either, but I needed to convince that guy that something real was happening, so I was very absolute about it. And I'm jumping off on another tangent again here. That's really about a lot of what we do as healers, alternative healers, is affect the belief system of whoever we're working with. Okay, so let's get out of that. Then over here is so here in the time, on the time template, so this is sort of over here on the left is the manipulation, vision, motion template, right? And the motion can be abstract as well. We move towards our goals. Oh, and the goals are in the future too, so that really works both ways. But in front of us in the future are our descendants. Behind us are our parents and ancestors. At least this is the way that we sort of normally do it. You know, when we do constellation work, we're thinking of ancestral trees. We're thinking of family systems over several generations. In a minute, I'll show you that it isn't always the case. But what's in front of us are destinations. What's behind us are places we've left. What's in front of us are things we want to do somehow. And things behind us are either done or we gave up on them. To the left and our right in this one are siblings and spouses, siblings, spouses, something like that. So these meanings I've always wanted to take a constellation and like put these templates down because I know that I'm using different ones of them. I think everybody's using different ones of them to build the meaning of a constellation. So,
Michael, do you mean that the ones you use are different to, say, the ones I use? Is that what you mean?
No, I think we all use pretty much the same ones instinctively.
Yes, so do I.
Yeah. They're built into the way the body, they're built there. We are embodied beings.
Yeah. No, so what did you mean then?
Thoughts. Say it again, please.
So what did you mean if you didn't mean that when you said we're using different ones?
I meant that, you know, when we are looking at a given configuration of people, which we'll do in just a second, not every one of this or this or this is going to apply.
Okay.
The context is going to select, are we looking at a timeline? Are we looking at attention? What are we looking at?
Okay, yeah.
And kind of my own perception of what I'm looking at in constellations has been deeply affected by a conscious awareness of these different possibilities. So, you've got a bunch of people facing in different directions. Well, for each one of them, the future's in front of them, the past is behind them. And then the question arises of, well, is there a past and future for the whole constellation yet? Do you understand me? Or if we integrate all these together, what's what? You'll maybe see that better in a second. Any comments or questions, thoughts? Let me look at everybody here. It always gets better if you talk.
I could say.
Linda, go ahead.
Okay.
We got two Lindas, Linda H and then Linda Knoll. It always gets better when you talk. It really does.
I'm just thinking how, in terms of that geometry, we talk about meeting things head on, or it even occurred to me when people talk about, say, a car crash, they talk about a head-on collision. They don't just say collision. So there's a real significance that it is stated that it's head-on as opposed to just a crash or whatever. And then I was just also thinking, I think last year my cat got ear mites for the first time, and I'm looking at them thinking, it's like a flea in the ear. And I thought, who in my immediate circle of friends and relatives is wanting to get at me? That flea in the ear. They really want to say something. And so that's that sideways event, because the ears are sideways. And so I really appreciated that. And there was something else too I was going to say. Oh yes, with NLP, often the marvelous image is, well, if you've got events in your life, throw them behind you. And I see that as a real fallacy, because I have done that, but it doesn't do anything, because it just puts the garbage smelling behind you, and the wind goes forward, and so this dealing with what is behind us, that is part of the constellation process, I think is really important, because we can't just pretend something didn't happen, because we're in the middle of it. And I also say I loved your I was very inspired by your comment about the future being in something. And so how we treat things that would appear to be inanimate is actually really important. And we would distinguish between becoming dependent on something. This is my cup, where we're leaning on it, and if we don't have my cup to drink from, or my car, we're leaning into that or falling into it, as opposed to it having its own state, which we respect as something that we use, a different relationship. And so I thought it's worth differentiating there, because it's not a case of animism, I think, where everything's got life, and we can go twirling off into that as an unreality, but it's a certain attitude that gives both an inherent upright dignity, and we respect that, be it a human or an inanimate object.
Okay, thank you. That was like 3 different great comments. Linda C., I'll come to you in just a second. About the first one, yes, you're absolutely right. The ears. Now, the ears really are omnidirectional, but they do point out sideways, and I hadn't thought of that. So that's thank you very much for that thought. NLP, all kinds of NLP stuff, involves these body space metaphors, I think. Because, you put somebody in a kind of a mild trance, and they're in the middle of their space, and where's dad, or where's so-and-so, how big is he, can you make him smaller, can you move him around, can you do all these things? That's all, Now, what you say about just putting it behind you not necessarily meaning anything, that's because, as you also said, people don't process it before they put it behind them. The reality of putting it behind you is to process it. That's what gets it behind you. right? So they are, as I say, just moving objects around, just moving bodies around. And that's when the process loses resonance with the deeper reality that it is meant to be connected with. So that's another cool thing. And the business about, look, our language in particular, English in particular, which is the lingua franca of science, unfortunately in a way, objectifies the hell out of the world. It turns everything that isn't, plant or animal or human, it turns it into lumps. Just lumps bumping, that's all it is. It's a rock. Well, and we think of that rock as dead, unchanging, inert, powerless in its own right. And in fact, everything around us is just as astonishing process. Some of it's slower, some of it's faster. We learn very much as babies to stop down the amount of reality that we really perceive and to put it in some pretty rigid boxes. I mean, hang on. Speak amongst yourselves. I'll be right back. No, I'm always talking about this, so I thought I would do it. Okay, so here, everybody see that? That's a quarter. That's a United States 25-cent piece. Okay, a coin, right? Okay, guess what? So's that. Guess what? So's that. So's that. They're all different shades, different shapes. Do you understand me? They're not the same at all in terms of what you actually perceive. So that quarter is an equivalence class of perceptions. It's a whole different class of perceptions that we've learned that we can treat as the same, quote, thing, unquote, and interact with in various ways that we know. So I can drop it and I can hold it up and I know it'll reflect light and stuff like this. So everything that we call a thing, it's really an equivalence class of perceptions and possible interactions. But it's not a chunk. It's changing too. This thing is slowly tarnishing and, 500 years from, well, even I don't know. Oh, guess what? Yeah, it is a quarter. Okay, I thought maybe it was a Canadian dollar. I was like, oh my God.
Those are gold.
Yeah. Well, it was looking, it's a new quarter. I haven't looked at quarters in a long time. But I mean, even 2 or 3 years from now, this will be tarnished. If I leave it outdoors, it'll turn green or something. You know what I mean? So I think that the idea that the future is actually inside of things and not out front, I think it's far superior to our Indo-European futures out in front of us. Because when the future's out in front of you, it's fixed, it's there. Do you understand me? In general, it's there. The mountain is there. The mountain isn't growing or changing or doing anything. But if everything is emerging out of everything, then it's like a plant. It's blossoming, and that's much closer to how reality really is happening. Right? The world around us is a massive emergence all the time. And if you want to live in a world where psychic skills and miracles and things are, where they're possible, that's a much more interesting way of understanding the world. It's much freer. Okay, so I've said enough about that. Linda C., you had, I think, something.
Yes, I was going to say that's been on my mind is when you were talking about the Hopi having the past out in front. In a way, I can identify with that because our past does color what we see. You know, if you've been suffered with the trauma, then you see things through a traumatized person's view.
Okay, wait. So you started out by saying the Hopis had the future or the past out in front?
The past.
Okay.
Didn't you?
Yeah, it's not the Hopis. It's another tribe, and
Oh,
I don't.
sorry.
Remember.
Okay.
No,
Well, it was
yeah.
mulling in my mind as we were
Yeah.
going through the lesson that you were wondering how that was going on, and it's a filter. The past is a filter in which we see.
No, you're right. We do. You're absolutely right. That's another very interesting. You see how much better this is when you talk? See, I try to prepare a certain amount of stuff. Then if I can get you to talk, it gets really good. If you don't talk, I run out of stuff about halfway through, see? But I learned doing this a long time ago that if I prepare enough stuff to fill up the whole time, then nobody talks and it doesn't get very interesting, right? So, but it's more vulnerable to do it this way because I see, like, I'm almost through all my stuff and, like, you know, it's only 8:15. All right. So let's go back and now see if we can get, and thank anybody else?
Welcome, Emily.
Where's Emily? Yeah, I saw Emily a minute ago. She popped out again. Okay. All right. So now we're going back to this, and we want to go down to this one. So load that space, please. Thank you. Okay. So now this is our standard constellation that a lot of you know about. It's the one written about in chapter 2 of the book. It's the Terrible Migraines Phaid constellation. So quickly, if you haven't seen this, this is a client, a son, who's got really bad migraines. And what we find out is that his father had an older brother. Can you see me? You can see my pointer, right?
Yes.
His father had an older brother who at 4 years old fell through a stair railing that collapsed, had a concussion, and died. Okay, and this is, if you can see the signs, this is Dad's mother. This is Dad's father. This is Dad. This is, I can't remember what I called him, John. It isn't John, it's something else. Whatever. This is the son who's got the migraines. And, you know, we do an intake interview, and these migraines come around in the fall, and they're well nigh incurable, and then they kind of go away the rest of the year. And this guy has shown up for a constellation. And inquiring about the family history, some of the first things we find out are that his father's older brother was killed this way. So then we set up a constellation. Now this is actually an amalgam of 2 different cases to kind of protect people, but it's sort of the basic teaching example in my book. So I've set it up here, and so how do we read this? I mean, we're looking at this arrangement of here's Grandpa, he's kind of got his head up, he's looking this way. Let me get this over here. Let me turn on his gaze line. He's looking this way. This is Grandma. She's looking this way. This is the boy with the migraines, who's like about 19 years old. He's looking this way. Here's Dad. He's looking off in this direction. Here's the goal. I mean, this is the client's goal, is to be migraine free. So what I want to ask you to do is, let's start. What is this? What is it? You know, we who do constellations pretty quickly start to see meanings emerge here. In a minute, I'm going to take those templates that I showed you, and superimpose them on this picture. But right now, let's just talk a little bit about, well, okay, what do we start to see in this constellation relative to this young man being able to achieve this goal with life and love flowing through the family to him to help him achieve that goal? So talk to me, folks. And remember, I can't see you, all of you, so I can only see a few of you at a time right now. So you can just speak up or whatever.
The father's parents, they have their backs turned to each other,
Okay.
and they're not communicating. And I do remember the story, actually. And it needs to be resolved. They're not dealing with it. They're just...
And what is it that tells us this? See, you just said their backs are to one another. How do
Yeah.
we, you know, maybe they're talking on the telephone to one another.
She's looking down.
I'm playing devil's advocate here.
She's looking down. She's very sad, and he's sort of looks kind of defiant. He's sort of looking up,
Yeah.
kind of straight ahead, but up.
Where did the posture of her head, what allows you to say accurately she's probably sad? Maybe
because well, she's kind of looking down.
right. But yeah, I mean, you could, how many there? See, there's already a metaphor in down, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We use the same word. We can say she's looking down. She can say she's really down today.
Yeah, she's feeling
Doesn't
down.
mean
Yeah.
she's laid out like this guy.
Mm-hmm. And neither of them are looking at anybody else. They're not looking at the son who's lying down. They're not looking at the boy's father. Yeah, I think he was called Don, wasn't it? Don's migraine.
Boy is Don, yeah.
Yeah. So they're just not dealing with it. You know, with this. So shall I say what happened? That they blamed each other, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, yes. What I'm interested in is trying to, and it may be an odd exercise for some of you, but I am trying to bring out the way in which these orientations and postures start speaking to us. What's this going to look like if the son was to have the support of the family in getting and achieving this goal? What would this look like?
If Don was to get the support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would this be different? And Marie, you're not the only one who needs to talk. I mean, thank you for talking.
That's okay. Well, they both need to look at the son who's lying down, the son who died, and accept what's happened, and that they shouldn't be blaming each other. They should come together and grieve together.
That's all absolutely true. What else can we say about some of these other figures?
It's
Go ahead.
interesting that the father, Dad, is looking completely away from everything, like his father. They're not processing the grief that they held. Not supportive of Don.
This experience of this child dying, who had this experience?
Mom and Dad and Don. Or no, Don's dad.
And
And the boy himself.
Well, the boy himself, and who here didn't actually experience this?
Don.
Don. So what the heck is he the only one who's looking at it? Why is he the only one who's looking at it?
Because he's the one that's been affected by it with his migraines.
He's looking at it head on, and hence his migraines.
Yeah.
Good one, Linda.
You know, basically, I mean, you guys are reading the constellation. I want us to not only read the constellation, I want us to get behind and understand how it is we are able to do this. That may be a weird thing for some of you, but I think it's useful.
Well, it's out of that social geometry. Nobody is facing anybody. Nobody's facing the truth. And their faces are basically all away from each other. There's a sort of, you could say there's a sidelong glance between the dad's ma and the dad's dad looking at the son, and perhaps even looking at their grandson. You could say there's a sidelong glance simply because that's the geometry. So and even that sidelong glance says their focus and their intention is elsewhere. And you could also say out of that social geometry with the dad's ma and the dad's pa that they're in quite diametrically opposite directions in terms of emotion, in terms of the head. So they're facing what their intentions are in different ways. That could probably be delineated and given a vocab. Sorry, I'm about to lose my computer battery, just a tick. So I think it's because we see nobody's facing each other, nobody's facing up to the problems, nobody's in dialogue. And so that's so I'm just plugging in my computer.
That's good.
So, yeah, that's what I would say.
That all
And
makes
also, Don's head is down as well, the same as his grandmother.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
So,
Which is usually a stance of grief.
Yeah.
so here's one of the templates. So what's behind all this? Are any of these actually out here?
His goal might be
His goal might be. And what's his goal?
to ignore what happened.
Okay. Right. And there might be a destination out there, which is get away from this. Right?
But that's because they can't bear to deal with that.
No, I know that.
Yeah. Sorry.
This is fine, Marie. This is an exercise in running through these things. So it's you know, which one of these is accurate, done or abandoned?
Abandoned.
Abandoned. If we take the other, let's see, this is, okay, wait a minute, let me get the other one here. Took me a while to figure out how to do this. Nope, that's not right. Hold on. There. Oh, we just did that one, didn't we? Wait a minute. We got to do the other one now. Wait a minute, why am I seeing the same thing? Am I seeing the same?
Exit first person perspective, maybe.
We just did.
There it is.
Yeah, you did the father with the abandoned. Yeah.
So if we look at this one, which one of these apply?
Those we flee from. He's trying to ignore the grandmother or his wife.
Yes. Those who follow us? Not really. Right?
Possibly his grandson.
See, the point is they don't all apply all at the same time. That's the sort of point I'm trying to make, is that they don't, you know, contextually, we're constantly picking which ones of these are relevant.
Yeah, depending on the feeling or the context.
Yeah, and those of you who are used to constellations or have seen this particular constellation before immediately know certain kinds of things because you're used to this. Okay.
It's interesting. What I hadn't seen before in that is that you could say his son was choosing to be an accomplice to this ignoring.
Oh, yeah. Wait,
I hadn't actually seen that before, but because his son's standing on the right of him.
I guess another part of what I'm trying to help you to do is see what this does to the lives of the people.
Yeah.
So if we go into Dad now.
Well, it's separating them, isn't it?
Yes. But, or no, actually I wanted the other. Well, you know, this man's future is out here in the void, away from his family.
Because he can't face his lost brother.
Yes.
Or his son.
So if there's going to be, so now we face this thing that I call sequencing. Okay? Which is, all right, well, we see a dynamic here. We see that, and actually the first movement of this constellation actually was this guy going over here, and, oh, he's a boy. Shoot. Because he's a boy, they don't have him sitting on his heels. All right, well, unfortunately, they don't. If he was a man, I could have him sit on his heels, but since he's a boy, they didn't implement that. Anyway, he goes over here and sits down next to this guy. You always have this question of like, how do we get, you know, well, you tell me, what do we want to see here? If there was a perfect arrangement of life and love flowing through the family towards Don, the client, towards the goal, what would that arrangement look like?
Well, the grandparents standing behind Don's dad and his brother.
Yeah.
And then Don standing in front of his father, or his father and the brother.
Let's go back here and preserve that other one. So if we had some perfect arrangement, what would we have? We would have, first of all, we would want the son, excuse me, we would want the son somehow this way, right? Somehow oriented towards his goal.
Yeah.
We would want to see Dad somehow supporting the son, right?
Yeah.
We would want to see Dad's older brother somehow in the sibling position relative to Dad.
Yeah.
And we would want to see Grandpa, let me get the head straight.
Yeah, looking straight ahead, yeah.
We would want to see these people, you know, first somehow having done this.
Right, yeah.
And so this would be like the perfect order. now we have a picture of the ancestral roots of this person, and life with love is flowing through these roots and supporting this person in achieving this goal. And where does the head pain go?
This goes.
Just goes away?
Or it goes back to the older brother who passed.
Okay. Yeah. It goes away. Or we have another one, and the pain in the head really goes back here. It's this person's fate, right? Now this is perfection. We might not get this in one constellation. This is a fairly simple constellation. In fact, I didn't finish it this way in the book. But you always now face, if you have and I think that most constellators do have some vision, however intuitive, of what it ought to look like. And there are some constellators, hopefully not too many anymore, who will just move the bodies around and put them in this order. Right?
Yeah, Grandma needs to look straight ahead as well, doesn't she?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes,
I mean, would it help to have the grandparents' parents behind them?
Well, yeah,
To
but
give-
they're not.
to give-
They're not in the constellation.
All right. Okay.
I mean, yeah, we could put a massive number of people here. There's a limit to how much you try to deal with in any given constellation, Marie.
Right. Not too many people.
Not too many.
Yeah.
These are the main players here. Now, behind, for this to have happened to this couple, indeed, there may well be some trauma back here in the great-grandparents.
Yeah. Mhm.
And if this doesn't want to resolve, if we do a constellation and this particular configuration refuses to emerge honestly, then we may have to come back again and look back on Dad's line and see that something happened to Dad's brother or Dad's father or something. Do you follow?
Yeah. Mhm.
So that we've got a trauma going from back here in the great-grandparents and landing on this one, which is then landing on this one.
Yeah.
But we don't necessarily try to do all that at once.
Right. Yeah.
Because typically we got a couple hours, or again, one of the advantages of home altar constellations is that you've didn't mean to do that. One of the advantages of home altar constellations is that you've got more time and can involve more. Okay, Izzy, go ahead.
So I'm presuming you're going to make a very big point soon that you can't just move people here and expect it to shift.
How about you make that point? No, seriously.
Well, as we know, some constellators do that, and you and I don't agree with that. This energy, in order to move people to this type of configuration, something has to change first within themselves. Something has to be seen, has to be truly felt. The way Michael and I do constellations, every single movement has to feel true. You can't just contrive these movements and say, oh, well, let's just move these people here and that fixes everything. No, the change in positions of these has to arise out of authenticity for it to really affect the client who's come to you with this issue.
Yeah. So that's beautifully said. Another way to say it is we want to hold the resonance between these people or the object persons and the deeper energies, the deeper souls, the spirits that are involved. All right. So if, we would be checking with the rep in the case of grandfather, and does that rep feel, who's representing the ancestor, as you know, I'm always experimental. I always say, well, what would happen if you turned and looked at your lost son? Or try looking at your lost son. How does that feel? And that representative may say, I just can't do that. Something won't let me. In which case, I'm going to honor that, at least for the time being. See if I can move some other things around and then come back and kind of ask that question again. But to just force the representative to do that, to me, you peel the representative away from the resonance with the ancestor. I mean, it's that, or if you're doing an object-based constellation, like in a home altar or something like that, you're just moving a little object around. But now what we come to is the question of, all right, well, here's our ideal vision. This is visioning step, right? This is, in chapter 4, I call this the visioning step. It's like, and I think all constellators they don't do this consciously necessarily, but they have some picture of what would be better. And that picture may be influenced by like what's attainable. Maybe this whole thing isn't attainable here right away. But now we go back to this one, which is the way things look now. And let me pull these things out of the way. And the question is, well, how do we do this? See, like the client, there's a bunch of different ways this could happen. I mean, the client is looking this way, so maybe we could maybe the goal should go over here first. Or, you know, this again is what I call sequencing. And you've got grandma's future's out here, grandma's attention is out here, grandpa's future is out here. So we could say, oh, well, everything should line up on grandpa. Well, the goals should go over, whoops, I didn't want that. You know, the goals should go over here, this guy should go over here and turn around. Do you see what I mean? There's a zillion different ways that this configuration could somehow turn into that ideal one. And to me, I know I am sitting with these things, and eventually I work on some kind of sort of principle of most natural moves, or least weird moves. That sounds weird, but you know, this is where somehow the future is right now, and this guy's future is stuck over here in the past. In this case, the way this constellation actually worked out was, first I asked if this could happen, and Grandpa was willing to do that. And look at this. When that happened, he softened up. And when he softened up, he had a spontaneous movement that said, you know what? It really wasn't my fault, but I shouldn't have blamed my wife either. When that happened, she softened up, came around, looked up, and they then had a slow approach, ending in a big hug. And I could actually have these hug, but I'm just, so if you want to see you can actually do this in coaching spaces. You have to work pretty hard to arrange the little figures. But it's interesting. but you have to like, da-da-da-da. There we go. They had a big hug. When they had a big hug, so let's unhug them. So we go back down to standing and go back down to standing. Then they were able to go side by side over together, having resolved this bitterness that existed between them, and acknowledge and mourn their I think they made these movements very beautiful, but kind of slow in a way. Takes a long time for them. Get rid of this, get this thing out of the way. Takes a while to learn to control this thing. So I want his arm on her shoulder. So now this takes place, right? And then Grandma stands back up again. So standing. He is standing. And we will wait for them. Grandma's getting up very slowly because she's old. So here they are. They're close to this one. They're like this. This one is over here because he's been down, you know, sitting on his heels, even though I can't make him do that because he's not that. See, they didn't implement as many postures for the kids, which is a mistake, I think. But that's
yeah, you could have an adult, use an adult and just make it small.
Of course I could, but then I would have to go over here and do a bunch of stuff that I don't want to bore you with.
Yeah.
Okay. So where I left this constellation was here. And this was an early constellation on my part. And the thing that I tell people all the time now, I really didn't have the goal in there. I hadn't reached the point where I felt like it was almost always necessary to put whatever it is you're after into the constellation. So I left it here with you know, some healing sentences where, you know, Don said, I'm little, you're big. I've carried this for you for a long time. I now give it back to you. Support me, please, if I live headache-free in honor of all that you suffered so that I might have life. And Grandpa says something, and that's where I left it. And I think maybe Dad turned around too and at least was able to kind of look. But there were still some questions about Dad. But you notice I didn't really line it up with the goal yet. And another thing I did was I left Don facing the past, which I wouldn't do now. You follow me? Now what I've got is I've got two important elders with their future in the same direction. So I would now want to turn him around like this, bring this over, and get close to that other configuration that I showed you, even though I haven't really necessarily got Dad involved yet. What sense am I making here? Who's got something to say? It's time again.
Yeah, so the love is flowing from the grandparents to the boy, to Don, and he's looking at his goal.
Yes, but you notice the way that the time, see, when we get to a constellation, let's see, is this the one? Is this the one? No, this is it. No, this is it. Yeah. This configuration, see, we've got a configuration here where the past and the future for most of the family is lined up now, right? And we achieved that. We achieved that by having particular different resolutions among the players, which is what Izzy was talking about a minute ago. That we didn't just, because there are 20 different ways to line up the bodies, the things here, so that they look something like this. Okay, so I'm gonna stop now, and it's time to see what you have to say. So let me. Oh, please Zoom. Okay, now I can see you all again. All right, what sense is all that making?
It means that Don will thrive more now because he's receiving love from the grandparents. You didn't actually place the father. I can't remember now. Did you place the father as well behind Don? I don't think you did you?
No, because I didn't do any work with the father.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. But Don is now receiving love, and it's flowing.
It's a start.
Yeah.
It isn't perfection. Again, I didn't do any, I'm sort of reporting to you on this amalgam of two constellations that I put into the book at an earlier stage of my own development where I wasn't as clear about this stuff. But what I was trying to help you see is how working with the individual people started to create that past to the future timeline in a natural way to get that stuff to start to line up without just grabbing people and putting them anywhere. There's 100 different ways that we could have created that arrangement. I mean, is that making sense to people?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yes, please, Marie. No, Linda H.
Two things. I'm thinking of social geometry, and I know you talked about the book, which I haven't found yet, but just this, we've got the horizontal plane, but those two figures of the dad's mum and the dad's dad looking down and up is just a whole other dimension that is brought up, which I think sounds really worth looking at. I'm thinking, in a sense, the down is loss. We're thinking what we've lost. We're looking at the earth. And when we're looking up, we're either looking at gain or we're looking at self-justification. Heaven will make me right. Or, that's the saints who look up and feel all is worthwhile. You've got something that's worth delineating in that other three-dimensional space. Right. The second comment, should I go on to that?
Yeah, please. I love this.
The second comment is
awesome stuff.
where I think where you talked about the Native American sense of the future is within the object. The future is intrinsic to that person or object, that what you are looking to do is not impose it from the outside, but sense what an art that is, sense what is intrinsic within that person or object or that will move it in the direction.
Or family system, intrinsic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so you just brought up this third dimension. Watch this. What happens if we see this? what do we start thinking about Dad now?
Yeah, the pedestal. Who has put him on the pedestal? Is it he or someone else? Yes.
Doesn't this profoundly change our sense of what might be going on with Dad here? Hang on. Oh, that's as small as I can get him. I could also do. I mean, in home altar constellations, we get this kind of stuff, right? In object-based tabletop constellations, we have lots of situations where one or two of the things on that floor or on that table are 5 or 6 times as big as everything else. So you're absolutely right. This third dimension matters a lot. I do constellations, remote constellations, constantly, offering people a whole room. I say, please get yourself in a room that has a lot of floor space if possible. But I've done them in like I did a couple in a bedroom for somebody, with somebody. And so some of the things that she laid out, you know, mom was up on the bed and the rest of the constellation was on the floor. Well, that meant something about Mom. Do you understand me? It meant some very interesting things about Mom. First of all, she was on the bed, which suggests either rest or sensuality or retreat or and above it, right? I had a constellation once where a client tried to put her goal up on a very high mantle, and it fell off 3 times while she was trying to do it. I had a helicopter pilot, Russian helicopter pilot. My workshop room has these sconces, these things that hold lights, little hanging lights. So when he started the constellation, he put himself up on top of one of these sconces, and everything else in the constellation was down on the floor. And that was his attitude towards his family and life. He was way the fuck up there in the sky, all right? I had another client who designated herself as a great big piece of cypress wood hanging on a wall. And I think it was the second constellation before she came down off the wall. So thank you so much, because you brought up that third dimension. That's one of the reasons I like to use, instead of just a tabletop, I like to use the whole room. I like to tell people, listen, you know, your dad could be a piece of furniture, or it could be a corner of the room, or it could be some object, or it could be something hanging from the ceiling, whatever. So yes, but my point really tonight was to try to kind of make you more aware of something you are intuitively doing all the time. You were intuitively built into us are all these inherent meanings of, like, look at me. I mean, it's endless. And the more you look at our different kinds of language, you know, what you said, head-on collision, people back to back, we're progressing through the argument. I'm up today, I'll be down tomorrow. It could be mood, it could be money, right? Most of our logically abstract notions are all built on concrete stuff. We generalize them and make metaphors out of them. And that really is what I was trying to talk to you about in 2 weeks ago, when I was saying symbols of natural objects. All the characteristics of natural objects are potential symbols. And really the truth is, there's way more meaning than we need in most situations, even in most sentences. Our job is to narrow it down to what's somehow most meaningful and what's intended. Okay. All right, so that's it for me. Next time, I'm going to go and start talking to you about revisit once again another topic I haven't thought about for a long time, which is characteristics of family and organizational souls. What is it? What can we say about a family soul? There's a lot you can say about a family soul. Again, these are typical Michael things. These are things that a lot of constellators don't talk about. They just do, which is fine. They do great work. I just happen to like to understand it in a different kind of way as well as do it. And I think some of you have figured out that that can be helpful to you at times. Okay. So, last comments from anybody?
Andres here. I've been using mats or felts when someone comes to see me at home for a constellation, and I sort of put the mats out, one mat for each person, and then I go and stand on the mat and do all that. But I'm really feeling inadequate from what you're saying. You know, like there's a lack of dimension on the mat unless I'm actually on it. When I go off it, I lose that. So really, I'm really just in the inadequacy of that.
Well, I mean, it's fine. You can also put object persons out there. When I do it, I tell people that they sort of have degrees of closeness. With the mat, you either sort of stand on it or you don't, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So with the little, if it's a vase on the floor or a book or something, you can just point your toes at it. You can put it between your ankles, which puts it in the center of your biofield, which is a deeper connection, or you can pick it up and hold it next to your heart, which is, sort of the center, that's the generating area of the biofield. So I have these sort of 3 degrees of closeness. 4, if you consider that sometimes a client will say, I really don't want to go near that. I can't go there. So the mats are fine. I think that the objects are richer, and I like giving people these degrees of closeness. Okay? Get as close to it as feels right. And I watch. Sometimes all they want to do is point their toes at it, And then there's others who just want to pick everything up and hold it next to their hearts. But not Dad. Or something. All right. So, okay, so this has been fun. It was fun building those pictures.
Yeah,
so,
Sharon couldn't make it, but she said to say hello to everyone.
Okay, well, hello to her. So this is a video, and it'll, yes, Andy's still there. It'll get posted by probably tomorrow afternoon. If you think there are other people who'd be interested in this, please tell them about it. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your presence very much, and I hope you realize how valuable what you say is. Every time somebody makes a comment, it sparks off something that I could say that I haven't thought of, or sometimes things I haven't, sometimes I learn stuff. It's so much more valuable that way. So much more valuable. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Many blessings.
Thank you, Michael. Inspiring once again.
Good.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Great. Great.
Izzy,
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
we need to be in touch, but I'm